Today I want to talk about 5 things that you should consider before you leave your full-time or permanent job to change your career and become a freelancer, entrepreneur, or become self-employed. These forms of career, freelancing, entrepreneurship, are of course very alluring because they provide you with a higher degree of autonomy and also in some cases unlimited income. But of course there are also a lot of challenges that are attached to it. So in this video I want to talk about 5 things you might want to consider before you leave your full-time job or your permanent part-time job to pursue a career as an entrepreneur or freelancer. And just keep in mind that none of these things are intended to discourage you or keep you from leaving your job to pursue a different career, but the intention is to manage your expectation and give you a heads up, or rather a full scope on what you are likely to expect, so that you are more aware of the risks and challenges that you might encounter and be able to mitigate these. Number 1 is income and benefits. Obviously, the biggest benefit of having a full-time or permanent job is that every month, once or twice, you get your paycheck and you can rely on a certain amount of money coming in each month as long as you are employed with that company, which nowadays I would say is not always a guarantee either. But once you leave your job to become an entrepreneur or freelancer, you will see that the reality will be very different. There will be months where you make more money, and then there will be months where you make less money, and during some months you might even come to a point where you wonder whether or not you will make ends meet with the money that you've earned from your business or from freelancing. Of course, being an entrepreneur comes with an almost unlimited upside, but the problem is that this is unlikely to happen at the very beginning. In the very beginning of building your business or getting full-time into freelancing, you will be facing the challenge of getting clients and get a steady income stream. And that is why it's so important that before you leave your old job, you make sure that you've accumulated a savings fund or an emergency fund that is large enough, and how much that is exactly will depend on your particular situation, but I would say that that should be at least 12 months, if not more. That will be one of the biggest changes that you will encounter and that you will really feel the effect of once you leave your full-time or permanent job. So instead of relying on that monthly paycheck, every month you really have to see where that income to cover all your expenses will come from. Number 2 is health insurance, and this is something that when working in a permanent job we might have taken for granted, but health insurance is indeed a big and valuable benefit. And once you leave your job, you will notice that it might really be a pain to look for and purchase your own health insurance, and it is not that cheap either to get a good health insurance that covers everything dental, optical at a relatively cheap price. If you leave your job but you have a spouse who is still working, then it is possible that you are still covered under his or her plan, so you might want to check that out. But if neither of you are working or if you are single, then you will most definitely need to purchase your own health insurance plan. And also one note of caution, just in case you are thinking of switching your insurance provider, which means that you are buying insurance from a different provider from the one that you had at your old job, then you want to make sure that you read the policy and the terms and conditions very carefully, because when you switch to a new provider, then any of your pre-existing conditions might not be covered. Number 3 is your ability to apply a schedule to your life. Our routines are normally built around certain anchors, and what this means is that when you were working at your job, let's say you were working from 9 to 5 or 6 p.m., which would mean that that is the fixed part of the day, the part that cannot be changed. So automatically this means that you would need to schedule all other activities around this anchor. If you start working at 9, that means that you will have to wake up at some time between 6 or 8 a.m. if you live really close to where you work. And if you work until 6 p.m., then that means that you will have dinner anytime around 6, 7, 8 or 9 p.m. and then go to sleep, for some folks maybe at 9 or 10 p.m. or 1 or 2 a.m. the latest, I hope. But once you leave your job, then you lose the structure, you lose this anchor. And what this means is that you will need to set up your own schedule and need to set up your own anchor. And depending on your personality and habits, that may not always be that easy. So consider this, at the time when you were still working in your old job, how easy or difficult did you find it to stick to that schedule? If even at that time you already experienced difficulty to stick to that given schedule, then once you are on your own with no one giving you a schedule, then you might find it even more challenging to make a schedule and actually stick to it. And if you don't have any schedule at all, then things can become chaotic very quickly and your level of productivity can even drop. But you can circumvent this challenge in some situations. For example, if you start your own business and you have a physical space and it has certain opening hours, let's say from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., then you already have that anchor and then you can easily build the other things in your life around it. Or if you're a freelancer and you do conference calls, Skypes with clients from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., then that would be your anchor and it would be easier to build everything else around it. So whether scheduling becomes a challenge or an opportunity really depends on your own habits and what you make out of it. If you are someone who can schedule your time very well, then you will find that by working on your own rather than for someone else, you can really make the most use of all your time and be able to fit all the important things and the things that matter to you into it. But on the other hand, if you don't have the capability of scheduling and setting up an anchor for yourself, then as I said earlier, it will very quickly become chaotic. Number 4 is motivation and productivity. And in relation to this, there are generally two types of people. There are people who, when they work by themselves, become less motivated, find it more difficult to be motivated, and also become less productive. But then there are people who, by pursuing what they really like to do, become even more motivated and more productive. And I would say that in general, most people tend to become more productive and more motivated if they are pursuing a goal that really matters to them. And I think the biggest challenge is that when you are working on your own, the source of motivation really changes from an external motivation or external and internal motivation to becoming mostly solely internal motivation. And this is what I mean. When you're at a workplace working for a boss together with other people, you not only derive internal motivation from yourself, but you also get the motivation from your boss and your peers, because the company will have a certain set of goals that you need to achieve. So you are likely to feel driven to achieve that goal and prove yourself in the workplace. And at the same time, your boss certainly also has certain expectations toward you, and if you want to progress in your career, then you will certainly try to meet their expectations. And another strong motivator is your peers. If you are at the workplace and you see your colleagues working really diligently, really hard on achieving the company's goal, then you might feel inclined to also work at least as hard, and you don't really want to be left behind and be perceived by them as working less hard. So all these things work like an invisible mechanism that keeps the company running and contributes to keeping the employees motivated. But once you leave your job and go into a more autonomous career, meaning either doing freelancing or becoming an entrepreneur, then nobody is really checking on you, except perhaps any investors who decided to invest into your business. But apart from that, on a daily basis, you are your own boss. And it is especially challenging if you are a one-man show, if you are running the business by yourself or you're doing freelancing and working mostly by yourself. Because you don't report to anyone, that means that you have to report to yourself. You have to check your own work and you have to assess and evaluate your own progress. You have to critique your own work, but at the same time you also have to praise your own work, because that is what might keep you motivated. And doing this, at times there might be a risk of either over-evaluating yourself or under-evaluating yourself, both of which is equally harmful. If you are working by yourself as well as for yourself, then you will need to find the entire motivation within yourself. It really has to come from the inside, and you will have to find strategies and tactics to keep you motivated on a daily basis. And you cannot rely on other people to provide you with that motivation or even just help you out with it. But this doesn't mean at all that what I call internal motivation is in any way less powerful powerful than external motivation. If at all, I think in the long run, internal motivation, motivation that you derive from within you, from your values and from your vision and what is important to you in life, is much more powerful. What I mean is that in the beginning, it is just challenging to actually translate this inner motivation, which is so abstract, into your daily habits, your daily routine, and into your activities. While when you were working, that external motivation that comes from your company's goals, from your boss's expectations, is already sort of translated for you. I could go into more depth, but in this video, I really want to try to just scratch the surface and give you an idea of the things that you might need to consider. Number 5 is social network. When you were still working at your full-time or permanent job, every week for 35 to 50 hours, perhaps you would meet colleagues on a daily basis with whom you would interact. And it is likely that during your time at your job, you would have formed some friendships with some of your colleagues. And by friendship, I don't necessarily mean like best buddies or best friends, but at least you had some people who you could talk to on a daily basis. Maybe during breaks, lunch or coffee breaks, you could get together and chat a bit about how the day was going and about the news. At least at that time, you had some kind of human interaction on a daily basis. But once you leave your job and pursue something on your own, you work for yourself and by yourself all the time, then it can get lonely pretty quickly. No matter how annoying at times maybe you feel that some of your colleagues were at your previous job, once you leave your job and you feel the reality of working by yourself every day, you might even miss them. If you work for yourself, by yourself, and you even work at home, and you happen to be a very social person, then things can get lonely very fast. Your daily interaction is likely to be with your clients, or if you have suppliers, your suppliers, and the mailman. Of course, it's not impossible to get the same amount of human interaction, or perhaps even more, once you work on your own. But the difference is that you yourself have to really actively work on it. And it's really not difficult to do this. You just need to be aware that this is something that you will need to replicate, this social network, this environment around you. For introverts, there is a completely different challenge, because once they leave their jobs and work on their own, they might feel completely happy with that situation and don't feel like they really need that human interaction. On the contrary, they are completely satisfied, happy working by themselves. But there is a danger to this, because introverts, when they work by themselves, may tend to become more and more reclusive and shy away from interaction with other people. So if you are an introvert, then I think you need to pay extra attention to this situation when you are working by yourself and not meeting a lot of people. Because if you don't seek out any human interaction at all, then one day you might wake up and realize that, oh, you don't know anyone at all and you don't have any friends. These 5 things that I just mentioned are not absolute advantages or disadvantages of leaving your job compared to working on your own. These are just things that you need to be aware of, things that might change. And if you are aware of these challenges and these risks, then you will be able to cope better with these and come up with a strategy or a way in advance to be able to deal with these challenges in a way that is best suited to your personality.